Hello, amateurs, and welcome back to our Six Nations series. And I've got a very special guest with me today. We were teammates at Esher Rugby Club, and he went on to become the head coach of London Irish Academy, a program which produced so much talent for the professional game. It's Patrick O'Grady. Patrick, how are you?
Morning. I'm very well, thank you, Tim. It's good to catch up again.
Yeah, good to see you, mate. Welcome to the episode. And we are going to be looking at the Ireland team as they're shaping up coming into this Six Nations. But before we do that, let's just have a little backtrack. What's the last 12 months been like for this Irish side?
Well, it's been pretty strong. I think when you reflect back to, the previous Six Nations, they're back-to-back champions, albeit it wasn't a Grand Slam because of the England upset. But I think they're in a strong position. They'd like the autumn internationals to go a little bit better. And I think a big factor is obviously the change of coaching setup. You look at Farrell now transitioning into the Lions role, Easterby stepping up. So I think it'll be really interesting to see as a cohort of staff off-field and players on-field as to how they perform and how they may need to tweak and change how they play as well to get the success that they've maybe had in recent years. For
sure. With the coaching thing, you mentioned transition there because it is quite a nice transition from sort of assistant coach up to head coach. But Andy Farrell is such a huge personality. Do you think that's going to cause a disruption? Do you think it might have a negative effect on performance?
Yeah, I think there's enough of a core of the squad there that were with Ireland, obviously through the Joe Smith era, which had outstanding success. Same with Andy Farrell. So I'm hoping that won't impact the performance of the squad too much. And I think there's enough experience there. When you look at the leaders in that squad who are then leaders back at their provinces, I don't think that'll upset things too much, to be honest. There'll obviously be a lot of pressure on Easterby to step up and perform in that sort of role. And I just wonder how that might take his time away from the areas of the game that he would coach, defence and the breakdown, which are obviously going to be critical for Ireland. So that's probably the biggest thing that I say concerned about, that I'm thinking about. But then I suppose if he's running things and he's at the helm, he can then allocate time within sessions across the week to develop the areas of the game that he wants to. And maybe in the past, he didn't get quite as much time as he would have liked in certain facets of the game. So I just think it'll be really, really intriguing to see how it unfolds over the next few weeks.
Yeah, that's a good point, because every coach has got their own priorities, the things that they think are most important. Do you think there might be, or could you identify anything that you think that Easterby might have more of a priority over that Farrell maybe didn't?
Yeah, well, he was obviously in charge of the defence and I think the breakdown as well. So he would certainly want a strong emphasis on that. But then when you're in that head coach position, you think of the amount of communication you've got to do with media, with players, selection, running coaches meetings. It'll be really interesting to see how he actually divides up his time across the course of the weeks, because he'll have so much on his plate. And then also that might adjust how Ireland look to play as well. You look at the kicking game, which I'm sure we'll get onto later, the shielding that isn't taking place now in the game with the change of regulations. I can see Ireland actually going back to what they did a few years ago very, very well and got a lot of success with the aerial game and kick to compete. So, he will have to adjust his training week to suit that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's take a look at the squad. Now, we're not going to go into all of the players, but a couple of players back from injuries, James Lowe and Dan Sheehan, both of whom played this weekend and came through fine. How important are they for this Ireland team?
Yes, it's absolutely massive. I think James Lowe now has got a huge amount of experience, and both sides of the ball is very, very strong. He obviously brings the kicking game to Ireland as well. They typically use him on his exits with his left boot, and it's an absolute cannon. He gets 50, 60 metres comfortably every time. And then I'll refer to the aerial game just now. He's very, very strong on that as well. So he's going to play a huge role with the Six Nations, absolutely huge. One area of Ireland's game where they've been challenged, I think, in recent years is probably the set piece line out in particular. So having Sheehan back will be a big, big boost for them. You look at the Six Nations in previous years, the World Cup, and even the autumn, I think they were put under a fair bit of pressure at line-out time. So that's one area I think Paul O'Connell and those players will want to get on top of.
Yeah, I mean, Sheehan's back, but Kelleher is a fantastic player as well. So, I mean, Sheehan's, World 15 level, I think, but Kelleher's no bad replacement at all.
No, and he's done a fantastic job as well. So I think it just shores things up a little bit, and I think gives them peace of mind that if they do have to change things at any point, they've got two very, very good players there they can rely on.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, some sort of relatively new players into the squad. Cormac Izuchukwu, who I saw this past weekend, and I was super impressed with him. He is a big physical specimen, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He is. And I even reflected on McCarthy, who came through fairly recently, I think, in the grand scheme of things, two big units. And it made me think as well, Easterby's obviously new in the role, and he wants a fairly settled squad, I think, just to help that transition through rather than bring in a lot of new players. And he's gone for the reliance of, the likes of O'Mahony, Conor Murray at scrum half, Cian Healy there. When you've got to think, actually, if he was in that role long term and been given a number of years in that position, would he be changing up selection a little bit to blood a few more younger players? Because there's only, I think, one uncapped player there in the Ireland squad. So it's just whether that mindset is thinking for the future, or actually, I'm new transitioning into this role. We pretty much need to perform straight away with the pressure that's on him. So I think that's why he's gone for a settled squad. But yeah, I think there's enough youngsters in there, the lads we just mentioned there, to keep that energy for the future.
Yeah, that's such an important thing, actually, that combination of age range within a squad, because each age sort of player will give you a different kind of thing. So talk to me about that, the energy of younger players in the squad and what that can give.
Yeah, it's huge. Obviously, the experienced players bring a sense of calm, probably a sense of leadership and direction on field and off field, which is great. But even I remember at London Irish, every year you'd look at the squad and you think, well, actually, let's look at the average age of the squad, average age of certain positions. And it's a massive, massive factor, that ability to back up training and playing week on week. Just the younger body is probably more durable to that, having not carried so many knocks and bangs over the years. But it is really interesting. The young players coming through certainly keep the other players on their toes. They bring a different energy, different enthusiasm. And I think as well, early on, you look at the likes of how Prendergast has come in, albeit he was outstanding at playing for Ireland 20s and Leinster early in his career. I think they bring a sense of confidence to a squad. They don't have that fear of failure, or that fear of making mistakes. And I think that's something that you have to take grasp of with young players coming through a system.
Yeah, interesting. And there's a few youngsters coming through in the front row, actually, with Boyle, McCarthy and Clarkson. And that is an area where Ireland are starting to look a little bit long in the tooth. So that's good to see.
Yeah, and that's your area of expertise, with. So I'll leave you to that.
Well, yeah, but it is. And also, so the big news from yesterday, Ty Furlong injured and will not be playing against England. That's a huge loss for this Irish side.
Yeah, it's massive. Like, he's been a cornerstone of everything they've done, really. You think about his main roles in set piece, he's obviously outstanding. But then the other work that he does around the pitch, his ball carrying, his soft handling ability, his work in defence, that's a massive loss. That's a massive loss. And I think that is a big concern for the Irish setup. I don't know the extent of the injury or how long he's out for, but they'll certainly be praying that he'll be back as soon as possible.
Yeah, now the step down to Finlay Bealham, I don't think is all that much. I rate Bealham quite highly. His scrummage is really low, and he just a fantastically flat back on him. It's after that, it's towards the end of the game where potentially a sort of a very inexperienced tight head is coming on. That's when the cracks might start to show a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And like you say, if that change has to happen, and teams then start going after them at set piece, scrum and line out, then that could cause them all sorts of issues. But fingers crossed we don't get to that point.
Absolutely. Okay, we kind of dallied on it a little bit before there, but the fly half debate, which is raging, I think, across Ireland. What do you see, Pat? Which way do you see it going?
It's tough. I look at the fly half debate. I also look at the centres as well. Think Bundy Aki, you got Ringrose, you got Henshaw. I don't know which way he's going to go, but certainly a fly half. I was thinking, I don't know whether Andy Farrell made that transition a little bit easier for Easterby around selection by giving Prendergast the exposure at the autumn. I think had Easterby suddenly made a selection and Prendergast hadn't played up until this point, then I think it would all kick off. And I feel for Crowley because he did very, very well in the World Cup. He did very well last Six Nations. And he's a very solid, consistent performer. Albeit, I think Prendergast has got that little bit of magic, I think, long term. But two very, very good players. It's a massive decision, isn't it? It is a massive decision. I mean, who would you go with?
I have been giving this quite a bit of thought, actually. And I think, as you just mentioned then, I think Prendergast's ceiling is higher than Crowley's. But I think right now, for this opening game of this Six Nations tournament, I'll go with Crowley. I watched him at the weekend, and I was really impressed with how he played. And I just think he's got a really calm head. And I think for this fixture, I'd go with Crowley.
Yeah, I'd do the same. I'd do the same.
And what about the centres then? Because I think Robbie Henshaw is playing the rugby of his life at the moment as well.
He is, and that's why it's such a hard decision. Bundy Aki, you look at back even to the World Cup, he was absolutely outstanding. Then transiting to the last Six Nations, he was a very, very good performer and consistent. And I think he's developed areas of his game. Particularly, he's not just a ball carrier now. He defends very, very well. He's got the additional soft skill set. And then Ringrose at 13. I'd say Henshaw's probably more of a 13 than a 12 at the moment. So it's a toss-up between Henshaw and Ringrose, but I just think he'll go with Ringrose just because he's been in that position so long. He's a very, very consistent performer, very good going forward and also defensively. So I think it's a very, very hard decision, but I think that it might be an Aki and Ringrose centre partnership to start with.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Ringrose, I think his defence is really underrated, isn't he? He hits hard. He goes at it.
He does. Yeah, there's some big collisions. I remember a couple against New Zealand a couple of years ago. He really puts his body on the line. He's certainly had some bangs for it. But yeah, he's very, very reliable. I think, as you said, underrated, massively underrated.
Okay. Then.
I don't know whether that selection will also be impacted by who they go for on the wings as well. It's it's a tough selection choice, but they've got options, which is brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, then we kind of talked a little bit about this earlier as well, but tactically for the Six Nations, what do you see? Do you see any changes from the autumn? Any developments? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think Ireland over the years have had to rely on quick ball at the breakdown. Their attacking play has to be front foot. They like to play on top of teams, and then clearly with the attacking options, I think Schmidt developed over the years, and Mike Carr and Andy Farrell have kicked on again. They need front foot quick ball. So breakdown will be massive for them. But as I said earlier, with the slight change in rules now, with the shielding of players in the backfield, I think they're going to go to the aerial game a little bit more. You've got Gibson Park there at 9, who's an outstanding player. He's got to be up there close to that World 15. And I think probably underrated is his kicking game. He facilitates the attack very, very well. And I can see him managing the game with his boot incredibly well. And then you look at the wingers, Lowe, Hansen, very, very good in the air. I think they're going to go to this kicking game and try and look to kick to compete to retain possession. So that will certainly be a weapon I think we didn't see probably Six Nations last year in autumn. And I think that will transition to their play this time around.
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, with the new change to the law, with the lack of shielding now, that competition in the air it almost favours the team that kicked it, doesn't it? Because they get a good run up to it.
Yeah, 100%. You wouldn't want to be in the back three there with a high ball. I think it's probably going to be wet in Dublin on Saturday as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do that very early on.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and what about the other way around? If you're coaching against Ireland, what would you look to try and exploit? What would you try and get into?
Yeah, I think we touched on it earlier. I think they have to try and disrupt them at set piece, scrum and line out in particular. If they can stop that Ireland launch, that first phase attack being clean and front foot ball, I think that'll do a lot in terms of just stagnating their attack. And then after that, I think they've got to slow the breakdown up. When Ireland get quick ball, they're very, very tough to defend against. They have multiple options. If they can get time in the tackle, hold players up, and then compete at the breakdown, which I think England can with the players they've got, that's got to be the two areas they go after to really, really just take the sting out of Ireland's attack.
Right. Okay, cool. What about anything else? Any other players that we haven't mentioned so far, or any sort of facets or tactics or factors that you think will play a big part in this year's Six Nations for Ireland?
Well, I think early on it's the conditions. The conditions in Dublin will limit how they play. They do like to move the ball. Even the forwards have a lot of touches with tip passes, the little balls out the back, and in the backs they love that wraparound play. But if it's going to be windy and wet in Dublin, they're probably not going to be able to be doing that early on. They tried that against New Zealand in the autumn and came a little bit unstuck, and passes didn't stick, and they just struggled to get going. I think they'll probably have to simplify things, be a little bit more direct, and just generate quick ball at the ruck. So I think we'll be seeing that early on. And if that generates success as time goes on, then they might get a little bit more expansive and creative, which I think they do very well. So I'm looking forward to seeing that as the weeks go on.
Yeah, for sure. And how would you, as the weeks go on, let's talk about that. How do you think this tournament's going to pan out for Ireland, and what is success for Ireland in this year's Six Nations?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an unbelievable tournament. I was looking just through the teams, the selections, and the fixtures across the course next few weeks, and it's very, very exciting. I think Ireland will do well, but I do think they'll slip up in one game. I don't think there'll be a Grand Slam. I would like to see Ireland winning the tournament, but You look at the threat that England pose now with their progression and their selection. France are obviously clearly very, very strong, and even Scotland, I think, are going to be pushing a number of teams close. So I think Ireland will do well. I'd like to think they'd win the Six Nations, but I don't think it'd be a Grand Slam year just because of the competition that's out there and that ability for anyone to beat anyone in this competition.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you're back in on 3 in a row. That would be an amazing achievement.
It would be. I looked at the stats the other day, and last year's Ireland have really kicked on in terms of either Grand Slams or Championship wins and Triple Crowns. So, yeah, let's hope they push those numbers up a bit more this year.
Absolutely. Okay, that's what we think, folks. But what do you think at home? Are there any key points that we've missed that you think will play a massive role, and any players that we didn't mention that you think might have a big say in this year's Six Nations for Ireland? Let's have that in the comments down below, and we'll join you there for a friendly conversation. Give this video a thumbs up while you're down there if you don't mind. It helps other people find it. And Pat, thank you so much for your time today, mate. That was a really interesting chat.
No problem at all. Great to catch up again.
Brilliant. Okay, and folks at home, you can subscribe there. You can watch that one next, and do not forget to get out and play.